Chapter 6 of A Popular History of Ireland, Book 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sharon Bautista. A Popular History of Ireland from the Earliest Period to the Emancipation of the Catholics, Book 1. By Thomas D'Arcy McGee. Chapter 6. Kings of the 7th Century. The 5 years of the 6th century which remained after the death of Hugh II were filled by Hugh III, son of Dermid the semi-pagan. Hugh IV succeeded A.D. 599 and reigned for several years. 2 other kings of small account reigned 7 years. Donald II, A.D. 624, reigned 16 years. Conall and Kellach, brothers, A.D. 640, reigned jointly 16 years. They were succeeded, A.D. 656, by Dermid and Blothmoc, brothers, who reigned jointly 7 years. Shinasag, son of the former, reigned 6 years. Cinfala 4. Finachta, the hospitable, 20 years. And Loingsech, A.D. 693, 8 years. Throughout this century the power of the Church was constantly on the increase, and is visible in many important changes. The last armed struggle of Druidism, and the only invasion of Ireland by the Anglo-Saxons, are also events of the civil history of the 7th century. The reign of Donald II is notable for the passing away of most of those saintly men, the second generation of Irish abbots and bishops, for the foundation of the celebrated school of Lismore on the Munster Blackwater, and the battle of Moira in the present county of Down. Of the school and the saints we shall speak hereafter. The battle deserves more immediate mention. The cause of the battle was the pretension of the petty Prince of Ulidia, which comprised little more than the present county of Down, to be recognized as Prince of all Ulster. Now the High Nial family not only had long given monarchs to all Ireland, but had also the lion's share of their own province, and King Donald as their head could not permit their ascendancy to be disputed. The ancestors of the present pretender, Congal, surnamed the Squint-eyed, had twice received and cherished the licentious bards when under the ban of Tara, and his popularity with that still powerful order was one prop of his ambition. It is pretty clear also that the last rally of Druidism against Christianity took place behind his banner on the plain of Moira. It was the year 637, and preparations had long gone on both sides for a final trial of strength. Congal had recruited numerous bands of Saxons, Britons, Picts, and Argyll Scots, who poured into the larbours of Down for months, and were marshalled on the banks of the Lagan to sustain his cause. The poets of succeeding ages have dwelt much in detail on the occurrences of this memorable day. It was what might strictly be called a pitched battle, time and place being fixed by mutual agreement. King Donald was accompanied by his bard, who described to him, as they came in sight, the several standards of Congal's host, and who served under them. Conspicuous above all, the ancient banner of the Red Branch Knights, a yellow lion wrought on green satin, floated over Congal's host. On the other side the monarch commanded in person, accompanied by his kinsmen, the sons of Hugh III. The red hand of Tyrwin, the cross of Tyrconnell, the eagle and lion of Inishowen, the axes of Faned, were in his ranks, ranged closely round his own standard. The cause of the Constitution and the Church prevailed, and Druidism mourned its last hope extinguished on the plains of Moira, in the death of Congal and the defeat of his vast army. King Donald returned in triumph to celebrate his victory at Emania, and to receive the benediction of the Church at Armagh. The sons of Hugh III, Dermid and Blothmoc, zealous and pious Christian princes, survived the field of Moira and other days of danger, and finally attained the supreme power, A.D. 656. Like the two kings of Sparta, they reigned jointly, dividing between them the labors and cares of state. In their reign that terrible scourge, called in Irish the Yellow Plague, after ravaging a great part of Britain, broke out with undiminished virulence in Erin, A.D. 664. To heighten the awful sense of inevitable doom, an eclipse of the sun occurred concurrently with the appearance of the pestilence on the first Sunday in May. It was the season when the ancient sun god had been accustomed to receive his annual oblations, and we can well believe that those whose hearts still trembled at the name of Bel must have connected the eclipse and the plague with the revolution in the national worship, and the overthrow of the ancient gods on that plain of prostration, where they had so long received the homage of an entire people. Among the victims of this fearful visitation, which, like the modern cholera, swept through all ranks and classes of society, and returned in the same track for several successive seasons, were very many of those venerated men, the third and fourth generation of the abbots and bishops. The Munster king and many of the chieftain class shared the common lot. Lastly, the royal brothers fell themselves victims to the epidemic, which so sadly signalizes their reign. The only conflicts that occurred on Irish soil with a Pictish or an Anglo-Saxon force, if we except those who formed a contingent of Congal's army at Moira, occurred in the time of the hospitable Finachta. The Pictish force, with their leaders, were totally defeated at Rathmore in Antrim, A.D. 680. But the Anglo-Saxon expedition, A.D. 684, seems not to have been either expected or guarded against. As leading to the mention of other interesting events, we must set this inroad clearly before the reader. The Saxons had now been for 4 centuries in Britain, the older inhabitants of which, Celts, like the Gauls and Irish, they had cruelly harassed, just as the Milesian Irish oppressed their Belgic predecessors, and as the Normans, in turn, will be found oppressing both Celt and Saxon in England and Ireland. Britain had been divided by the Saxon leaders into 8 separate kingdoms, the people and princes of several of which were converted to Christianity in the 5th, 6th, and 7th century, though some of them did not receive the gospel before the beginning of the 8th. The Saxons of Kent and the southern kingdoms generally were converted by missionaries from France or Rome, or native preachers of the first or second Christian generation. Those of Northumbria recognize as their apostles St. Aidan and St. Cuthbert, 2 fathers from Iona. The kingdom of Northumbria, as the name implies, embraced nearly all the country from the Humber to the Pictish border. York was its capital and the seat of its ecclesiastical primacy, where, at the time we speak of, the illustrious Wilfrid was maintaining, with a wilful and unscrupulous king, a struggle not unlike that which Becket maintained with Henry II. This prince, Egfrid by name, was constantly engaged in wars with his Saxon contemporaries, or the Picts and Scots. In the summer of 683 he sent an expedition under the command of Bjort, one of his earls, to ravage the coast of Leinster. Bjort landed probably in the Boyne, and swept over the rich plain of Meath with fire and sword, burning churches, driving off herds and flocks, and slaughtering the clergy and the husbandmen. The piety of an after age saw in the retribution which overtook Egfrid the following year, when he was slain by the Picts and Scots, the judgment of heaven, avenging the unprovoked wrongs of the Irish. His Scottish conquerors, returning good for evil, carried his body to Iona, where it was interred with all due honor. Iona was now in the zenith of its glory. The barren rock, about 3 miles in length, was covered with monastic buildings, and its cemetery was already adorned with the tombs of saints and kings. 5 successors of Columcille slept in peace around their holy founder, and a 6th, equal in learning and sanctity to any who preceded him, received the remains of King Egfrid from the hands of his conquerors. This was Abbot Adamnan, to whom Ireland and Scotland are equally indebted for his admirable writings, and who might also dispute with Bede himself the title of Father of British history. Adamnan regarded the fate of Egfrid, we may be sure, in the light of a judgment on him for his misdeeds, as Bede and British Christians very generally did. He learned, too, that there were in Northumbria several Christian captives, carried off in Bjort's expedition, and probably sold into slavery. Now every missionary that ever went out from Iona had taught that to reduce Christians to slavery was wholly inconsistent with a belief in the doctrines of the gospel. St. Aidan, the apostle of Northumbria, had refused the late Egfrid's father's absolution, on one occasion, until he solemnly promised to restore their freedom to certain captives of this description. In the same spirit, Adamnan voluntarily undertook a journey to York, where Aldfrid, a prince educated in Ireland, and whose itinerary of Ireland we still have, now reigned. The abbot of Iona succeeded in his humane mission, and crossing over to his native land, he restored 60 of the captives to their homes and kindred. While the liberated exiles rejoiced on the plain of Meath, the tent of the abbot of Iona was pitched on the Rath of Tara, a fact which would seem to indicate that already, in little more than a century since the interdict had fallen on it, the edifices which made so fine a show in the days of Patrick were ruined and uninhabitable. Either at Tara or some of the royal residences, Adamnan on this visit procured the passing of a law, A.D. 684, forbidding women to accompany an army to battle, or to engage personally in the conflict. The mild maternal genius of Christianity is faithfully exhibited in such a law, which consummates the glory of the worthy successor of Columbkill. It is curious here to observe that it was not until another 100 years had passed, not till the beginning of the 9th century, that the clergy were exempt from military service. So slow and patient is the process by which Christianity infuses itself into the social life of a converted people. The long reign of Finacta, the hospitable, who may, for his many other virtues, be also called the pious, was rendered farther remarkable in the annals of the country by the formal abandonment of the special tax, so long levied upon, and so long and desperately resisted by, the men of Leinster. The all-powerful intercessor in this case was St. Moling, of the royal house of Leinster, and Bishop of Fernamore, now Ferns. In the early part of his reign, Finacta seems not to have been disposed to collect this invidious tax by force, but yielding to other motives, he afterwards took a different view of his duty, and marched into Leinster to compel its payment. Here the holy prelate of Ferns met him, and related a vision in which he had been instructed to demand the abolition of the impost. The abolition, he contended, should not be simply a suspension, but final and forever. The tribute was, at this period, enormous, 15,000 head of cattle annually. The decision must have been made about the time that Abbot Adamnan was in Ireland, A.D. 684, and that illustrious personage is said to have been opposed to the abolition. Abolished it was, and though its reenactment was often attempted, the authority of St. Molling's solemn settlement prevented it from being reinforced for any length of time, except as a political or military infliction. Finacta fell in battle in the 20th year of his long and glorious reign, and is commemorated as a saint in the Irish calendar. St. Molling survived him 3 years, and St. Adamnan, so intimately connected with his reign, 10 years. The latter revisited Ireland in 697, under the short reign of Loingsech, and concerned himself chiefly in endeavoring to induce his countrymen to adopt the Roman rule, as to the tonsure and the celebration of Easter. On this occasion there was an important synod of the clergy under the presidency of Flann, Archbishop of Armagh, held at Tara. Nothing could be more natural than such an assembly, in such a place, at such a period. In every recorded instance the power of the clergy had been omnipotent in politics for above a century. St. Patrick had expurgated the old constitution. St. Ruadan's curse drove the kings from Tara. St. Columbkill had established the independence of Alba, and preserved the bardic order. St. Molling had abolished the Leinster tribute. If their power was irresistible in the 6th and especially in the 7th centuries, we must do these celebrated abbots and bishops the justice to remember that it was always exercised against the oppression of the weak by the strong, to mitigate the horrors of war, to uphold the right of sanctuary, the habeas corpus of that rude age, and for the maintenance and spread of sound Christian principles. End of chapter 6. Recording by Sharon Bautista in Evanston, Illinois.